Hi everyone, this is a video on the random module, which is part of the Python standard library. If you want to get to the documentation that tells you all about the random module and its methods, you can simply type Python random into Google, and then with the list of results that comes up, you want to be sure to choose the documentation corresponding to the latest version of Python. In this case, that would be 3.6 down here in the second option. If you choose Python 2.7 by accident, you're going to recognize it because your page looks like this with the teal color on the side. So just simply drop down the version and change to the latest stable version of Python. Okay. In a beginning Python class, we typically concentrate on 4 of the Python random methods. Those being randint, which we use in our guess a number game. So that's this right here. And notice that the documentation says return a random integer such that it's between a and b if you're going to do randint paren a comma b. So anytime you see the word return in the documentation for a method in the Python standard library, it means that if you run this method, there's going to be a value coming back. Okay, so a new value is going to get created from this method, which means that when you call it, when you invoke this method, you should either have a variable assignment sitting on the left of this method call, or you should have the whole thing sitting in a print statement or something that will do something with the value that's coming back. Okay, so randint is one of the methods that we commonly use. The next one we commonly use is random.choice, and that will return some random element from a list. Okay, so if you have a list of student names, it's going to give you randomly one of the names from that list. So random choice is one that we use a lot. And then random shuffle is one that we use a lot as well, and noticeably absent from the documentation for shuffle is the word return. That means that no new value is created, so you actually don't want a variable assignment or a print statement sitting there waiting for something to come back from random.shuffle, because nothing will come back from random.shuffle. So if you take that same list of students and you put it inside this method invocation, as x, meaning in between the parentheses, you are going to lose the original order of that list. And the list will be replaced with a new randomly ordered version of itself. That's how random.shuffle works. There is no new value. No new list is created. It actually shuffles the list that you already have. And we'll see that in action too. And then the fourth method that we use from time to time in a beginning Python class is the random.sample, and that's simply like random.choice, except you're choosing more than one random element from a list. Okay, so let's see these in action. If I switch over to PyCharm, I'm going to just start out with a list of, let's do integers. Okay, so I'll just call it my numbers, and we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have 7 numbers in a list, and they happen to be in the right order. So let me do import random. Okay, so as I said, randint is the first item that we use. Now I have imported random this way, which means that if I want to use the random dot methods, I have to type random dot and then the method name. So that means I have to do random dot randint, and let's say I'm going to make my range, let's do 1 to 100. Okay, in fact, let's put this in a for loop, and we'll choose 5 of these just so you can see that we're going to get 5 different answers. Now remember that when we looked at the documentation, randint returns a value, and if you look closely on this line of code, we're not doing anything with the value that's coming back. So let's just go ahead and put this in a print statement. so we can actually see this play out. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I'm running the right file. And as you can see, I did indeed get 5 random numbers. Now, if you are familiar with the idea of random and random seeding and from a mathematical or a prior programming experience point of view, you might wonder, well, if I run this again, am I going to get the same values? And no, you're not, because Python takes care of its own seeding. So you will have truly random numbers on each run of the program. That is different from what you'd experience if you were doing this in C++ with the GNU compiler, because you always start out with the same seed. Okay, enough of that. Now we're going to actually explore the other methods that I introduced you to, but this time we're going to be using this my numbers list that we created. So I'm going to comment this example out for now. And I am going to introduce you to random.choice. And random.choice's documentation says you need to feed it a list. Okay, so I'm going to give it my numbers into its parentheses. And its job will then become to return to me a new value, which is a randomly generated, or I should say randomly selected element from the list I give it. So it's going to be some number between 1 and 7. I don't have anything waiting for that value that's coming back, so I'll just, for this example, save it in a variable called x, and then we will print x. So if I run this, I do indeed get a random element from the my numbers list. If I run it again, I get a 1. If I run it again, I get a 2 again, a 3, a 7. So you can see that these are genuinely random elements chosen from this list. All right, let's comment out this example. And let's talk about random shuffle. All right, so the next up, random.shuffle. Now, as I said, random.shuffle, if you look at the documentation, it is a method that does not return anything. So therefore, I should never have, a variable waiting for it. I should not have this in a print statement, because that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's get rid of that for a second. So the first thing we need to know is that random shuffle can't do anything unless you give it a sequence. And so I need to feed it my numbers. The next thing to remember is that nothing gets returned from random.shuffle. Now, what does that mean? That means that there's no value coming back from it. Let me demonstrate. If I saved this in, let's say, a variable called x, and then turned around and printed x, what do you think I'd get? Well, let's run it, and I get none. So nothing comes back from this. So what exactly is happening, and how can I demonstrate that on the screen? Well, what's happening is this my numbers list starts out with a certain sequence, and you can see I ordered it in smaller to greater numbers. That order is forever gone once I run random.shuffle against it. So if I put my numbers in here, okay, so there's nothing stored in X, I'm going to get rid of that. I am now running random.shuffle with the my numbers list, and then if I print my numbers, okay, let's do this more logically. When I print my numbers here, it will be in the original order. And when I print my numbers down here, it'll be in a shuffled order because of that line 11 where I actually shuffle the list. So if you run it, you can see that originally the list looked like this. After the shuffle, the list looked like this. So there's no there's no reason that you would want to put the random.shuffle line of code inside a print statement or on the right side of an assignment statement, because that doesn't really make any sense. So that's random.shuffle. Now let's comment that out and introduce you to random.sample. Okay, so here's the random.sample method. And if you forget how any of these methods work, like I said, you can always go back to the documentation and read about it. But the way that you run random.sample is it requires two things for you to give it. And once you give it those two things, its job is to give you back a list of however many things that you need randomly chosen from another list. So let me demonstrate because that'll be the easiest way to explain it. Okay, so the two things that I need to feed random.sample in order for it to do its job is I need to tell it what list I'm looking in, so in this case my numbers, and then I need to tell it how many items I want randomly selected from that list, and let's just say 3. Its job after that is to then return to me a list with that many elements in it, randomly chosen from the list I requested. So let's just save that in X so we have something to print out. And let's see what we get. Okay, let me get this off the screen there. And the first time I run this, I get a 346. If I run it again, 714. So you can see that I'm actually getting 3 randomly generated or randomly chosen numbers from this sequence. Now, does that mean that those numbers are pulled out of my numbers? Like, are they out of play? So if let's say I copied this line of code. Let's say I copied this a few more times. Do I get any duplicates? Yes, I do. So 7 was chosen that time. 7 was chosen the second time. We get a 5 in the first 3. So actually randomly selecting numbers out of that list does not remove them from play. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember if the game you're developing or the application that you're building is dependent upon that initial set reducing each time you randomly choose things from it. All right, so that was a quick tour of the 4 commonly used random methods, of course in the beginning Python class. Feel free to explore the other methods in the random module because there's some fun ones in there. But for now, that's all you need to know for this course as far as random goes.